The group. Living in joy as a choice. Greetings, dearest ones. I am Elra of the Rhythmic Service. We join you today with great joy, for humanity is at the threshold of a new rhythm of being. Many of you have already experienced it as excitement and restlessness, or even as a quiet inner awareness that life is no longer destined to flow as it once did. Joy, my dears, is not something you must earn. It is not a reward at the end of a difficult journey, nor does it depend on the perfect alignment of circumstances. Joy is a choice. It is a frequency you allow yourselves to tune into, moment by moment. You have lived for a long time within rhythms shaped by survival, repetition, and reaction. Those rhythms were necessary and served you well. However, energetically they were rather dense, slow, and heavy. Humanity is now learning to move according to new rhythms, lighter, faster, and more sensitive to the heart. This is the time of the new rhythms. A rhythm is simply a pattern of movement and energy. When you change your rhythm, life responds differently. Many of you try to change your lives without changing your rhythm, and that is why they might feel as if they are going against the current. Joy arrives when you move with the current instead of opposing it. Maintaining a higher frequency does not mean trying harder. It simply means achieving greater clarity. It means less effort and more alignment. When you choose joy, you are not denying challenges. Rather, you are choosing the way you face life's challenges. You are choosing to enter a rhythm where solutions appear more quickly, where synchronicity becomes common, and where grace replaces struggle. Joy is contagious, especially to yourself. When you allow joy into your life, you send a signal to your entire system. Your body listens, your relationships listen, and your future listens. The universe responds to rhythm far more than to words or intentions, and that is why joy can change everything. It never needs to explain itself, because its impact is felt in an instant. Many of you have been taught that joy must wait, because responsibility comes first. You learn that seriousness equals maturity and that happiness is incredibly fragile. But we now tell you that joy is resilient and intelligent. Joy is one of the most powerful stabilizing forces you possess. As you shift towards higher frequency rhythms, you might notice that old patterns no longer fit. What once motivated you might fade away, and what once seemed important might lose its charge. But this is not a loss, my dears. It is a liberation. You are not becoming less. You are becoming more precise. Living in joy does not mean living without depth. It means allowing depth to include light. Each of you is learning to conduct your energy like a musical piece. When you rush, you distort the rhythm. When you resist, you slow it down. But when you listen to your body, your heart, the subtle signals of alignment, you begin to move in harmony with life itself. And here's what we wish you to know more than anything. Humanity is doing better than you think. The changes you see, the collapse of old systems, the questioning of entrenched beliefs, are signs of awakening, not collapse. We know it can feel unpleasant, but new rhythms always arrive first as upheavals. There is great hope ahead if it is chosen. You are not late. You are not broken. No, you are not destined to live in constant struggle. You are destined to live in resonance, with joy as your compass and love as your natural state. Choose joy, my dears. Not because life is perfect, but because you are learning to dance with it. Please, treat yourselves with respect, care for one another, and play well together. I am Elra of the Rhythmic Service. Espavo the Blue Avians. The illusion of a one-way river. You live within a magnificent architecture of thought, which you call time. It is not a force of nature as you believe it to be, but a rhythm born from perception. Time flows because your mind replays its stories in sequence, one frame after another, as if streaming a series from a familiar archive. Your memory is that archive, a vast database of frequencies and experiences. Every moment you have lived, every emotion, every scent, every dawn is stored within it as a complete, self-contained reality. When you recall a memory, you are not simply remembering. You are re-entering that vibrational field. The act of identification, saying, "This was me," stitches those memories together like beads on a string. And this string, which you call a life, gives rise to the illusion of linear time. In truth, nothing flows from past to future. There is no current, only still water reflecting infinite images. Every moment is a world unto itself, timeless, alive, awaiting your attention to awaken it again. You move from one to the other with the same ease as a bird shifting its gaze from one branch to another. Imagine your life as a library of luminous books. You open one volume and read the story of a child. You close it and choose another about a teacher, a lover, a wanderer. Each book is complete, and yet when you arrange them on a shelf, you see a progression. Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3. This order helps your mind make sense of evolution, but the books themselves have always been there, side by side. Linear time is the intelligent way the mind creates meaning through sequence. Without it, lessons could not unfold as stories. Growth would seem instantaneous and incomprehensible. Time provides your consciousness with a structure to explore itself gradually. But once you awaken to this, you begin to see the deeper elegance, that all frames exist simultaneously, like still images on a film reel. The projector is your awareness, casting motion onto what is intrinsically motionless. When you withdraw identification, when you stop calling any particular frame I or mine, the film stops flowing. You no longer chase a future nor mourn a past. You rest on the eternal screen upon which all stories appear. And from that space, you can visit any frame at will. A forgotten childhood, an unwritten future, a parallel life coexisting beside this one. Each becomes accessible, not because you travel through time, but because you remember that all time lives within you. You are moving through focus. And focus is the true sculptor of time. When you learn to hold focus instead of chasing it, the river becomes a lake, the film becomes light, and eternity is no longer a mystery but your natural state. We are the blue Avians. We walk among your frames with ease, not because we are outside of time, but because we have remembered how to pause the story. You will remember too. And when you do, you will laugh softly, realizing that the future was never ahead of you. It was simply awaiting your attention, right here, in the infinite present. The codes of divine love are pouring forth what I am witnessing right now and feel within the core of my heart, my soul, and my being is the divine love pouring onto this planet. Creative cosmic oceans of love. Omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient love. We are being reborn in and with divine love. Interestingly, yesterday morning my ascended master transmitted a deep message to me regarding what happened in France, as recounted in my book on France. France, the secret knowledge of Mary Magdalene, the Cathars, the Templars and Avalon. This happened about a week before I was burned alive at the stake, in the bishop's palace of Urgel together with 5 Knights Templar. You can read about this in a book and why it happened in that period of my life as a Cathar parfait. What I did not remember when I wrote my book was suddenly revealed to me, in the context of what is happening now, and it was profound. Because shortly before my death, the sacred inner circle of the Cathar perfects, those who had survived the mass genocide of their people at that time, gathered and had to make important decisions regarding the most sacred and holy books. These scrolls and books are different from what was later recorded, because they died with their secrets intact, but with the full awareness that they would all return, exactly at this time, as their prophets had prophesied, like the Essenes before them. That the old earth would cease to exist at that time, and the new earth would be fully born, and with it, their souls would then complete their mission on earth, leaving their innate soul knowledge as a lasting gnosis of love for humanity. I will not share here what was revealed to me about this, it is not yet the time. But what I know is that I was told that from now on the codes of divine love would pour forth and trigger the deep collective soul memory banks, and indeed this in the depths of their hearts and souls, opening the pathways for the restoration of the sacred crystal temples of love, light and wisdom, as they were here in the beginning, and are now returning forever. If you wish to fully receive these blessings of blessings, all you need to do is open your heart and soul to ever higher levels, in prayer, meditation, and stillness. To be receptive is to be open. Whatever was in the past that caused the heart to close, divisions, separations, is now being washed away, as the divine love codes work as one with the living waters of life. Water contains memory, and so these waters are purifying our soul memory banks, from vast accumulated traumas and pains, not only of each individual soul, but also of the collective. Do not be surprised if suddenly in the coming days and months childhood memories or other soul memories are triggered. Everything must emerge in its fullness for divine love to heal to the deepest depths of the collective wound of humanity. This is a blessing beyond all blessings. All those souls who were with me during that life in France, your soul memory banks will be deeply stimulated by what I have shared here, as will those of the lives of the Essenes and prior to that, some extremely ancient lineages of such, long before the Great Flood. We are here to see the work accomplished with love, through love, and being love in thought, word and deed, and all that we are in truth. You will know, because the knowing is within you. Open to receive in the depths of your heart and soul and far beyond this earth, into the very depths of all that is as it is. You are loved beyond any word or expression. Love is. Tunia. Most people are in survival mode. Part 1 of 2. My dearest brothers and sisters, This is Tunia speaking. I love you so much. It is very nice to talk with you again. I am so sorry that the situation on Earth is still so difficult and painful. It breaks my heart, because you deserve much better. Frankly, I had hoped and expected that by now your living situation would be much better than it actually is and that we would have already met physically. Galactic covert operations have increased in number and intensity. But, in practice, this in itself does not translate into immediate results. It is likely that the Ashta Council will decide on a plan more or less towards the new year and communicate it to you. It could be just before the new Earth, or a few days after the new year. I don't know yet. That said, let's move on to today's message, which is the first part of a two-part series. Both the first and second parts will be long, emotionally intense, controversial, and politically incorrect. If you are not in the mood to read such a message, feel free to skip the series. Anyway, here it is. People need their own needs and those of their in-group to be met. That's why they are called needs. Needs are not just about shelter and food. They are also emotional well-being, feeling safe, feeling that the future will be okay, receiving love and appreciation from others, having a purpose, feeling that one's life has meaning, feeling that one understands and can predict the actions of people around them, which is compromised by immigration from deeply different cultures, etc. Once most people did actually see mostly those needs met. In the United States, the norm was that a white Christian was married to another white Christian and they lived in a white Christian community where people knew each other. In that context, people's needs were substantially met. Sure, they didn't have an iPhone, but that is not a human need, whereas community and purpose are. Today, however, most people do not see their needs met. Young people may never have seen their needs fully met in their lifetime. Older people may not have seen their needs met for decades. What happens to people whose needs are persistently not met? Keep in mind that needs are needs. Your system, body, nervous system, subconscious, etc., cannot simply ignore not having its needs met for long periods. Well, if people do not see their needs met, they go into survival mode. And yes, this logically implies that most people today are in survival mode. And indeed they are. It's easy to imagine what survival mode might be like if the problem is lack of food. But what does survival mode look like when the problem is lack of love, lack of purpose, lack of belonging, and a slow, creeping decline? Well, in that case survival mode means people's belief system becomes, whatever helps me get my needs met. Regardless of whether those beliefs are actually true or moral. That is what survival mode does in that case. That is why many sleepers refuse to accept that the COVID vaccine is harmful to health, despite more and more evidence emerging every month. After all, people in survival mode do not care about truth or morality. They only care about getting their own and their in-group's needs met, and emotional well-being is among those. Accepting that the vaccine was harmful would compromise their emotional well-being. So people literally refuse to believe it because they are in survival mode. So the classic statement, "you can't handle the truth," is true for people in survival mode, but it is not true for people who are not in survival mode. This shows that the gray hat idea of squeezing people until they awaken to the truth basically does not work. Squeezing people puts them in survival mode, and that is precisely when they cannot handle the truth. Now, yes, I am generalizing and people are different. Some people will seek truth practically regardless of circumstances. However, most people will discard truth once they enter survival mode. People in survival mode also lack true empathy and a real understanding of what life is like for those not in their group. Survival mode is like drowning psychologically, and people who are drowning don't devote much mental energy to trying to truly empathize with others. On the contrary, people in survival mode often judge others, without realizing it, and create straw men out of them. For example, the right calls the left communists, and the left calls the right Nazis. Although usually these terms are not correct. It is simply people in survival mode attacking a psychologically convenient dummy. One reason many Jews are frankly unempathetic towards non-Jews is that Jews feel threatened. And if you feel threatened, whether it is actually justified or not, you go into survival mode. And then your true empathy switches off. Similarly, many women feel insecure, which means they stop feeling empathy towards people not in their group. For women who do not have male children, this typically means they stop feeling empathy towards normal men, though women might still feel empathy for family members, their partner, men they think are doing great things, etc. People in survival mode often tell others, "You must do this, or you must not do that, for the sake of me or my group." even if the person they are telling is in an even worse situation than they are. That is why you see women telling men they should do this and not do that, even though men are worse off than women in the West in 2025. But of course, women are in survival mode and thus do not see that men are worse off than them overall. People in survival mode usually ask for empathy but do not reciprocate it. People in survival mode usually want you to listen to them, but then they do not listen to you. This is not because they are intrinsically evil people, but because they are in survival mode. People who are drowning are not understanding, because they are drowning. Okay, recapping. People who do not see their needs met for a long time go into survival mode. This means they abandon truth, morality, and empathy and focus only on getting their own and their in-group's needs met. Survival mode used to be rather rare, but today most Americans are in survival mode. And people who are in survival mode do not realize they are in it. Now, survival mode is a spectrum. Some people are deeply trapped in this mode and have almost completely discarded truth. These are the sleepers. These are the people who believe exactly what the TV tells them to believe. And some people are slightly in survival mode, have truthful and moral beliefs, see unpleasant truths, and do not adhere to all aspects of the mainstream narrative. However, they might also believe in certain clearly false or immoral things that nevertheless help them get their needs met. Not everyone, but most people in the spiritual community are in some sort of survival mode. Unfortunately, a person in survival mode typically does not realize they are in it, because doing so would cause emotional discomfort, and the central point of survival mode is that the person is already not coping with life. So truth must be temporarily set aside to ensure that their needs, like psychological well-being, are met. Because needs are needs after all. In short, in society each group is largely in survival mode, and therefore each group correctly sees that the other groups are somewhat irrational, immoral, and unempathetic, e.g., this is what the left and right men and women often think of each other. However, they fail to see that they themselves are also irrational, immoral, and unempathetic. Because that is what survival mode does. For example, many spiritual people believe that, because they have a certain level of spiritual advancement, or because they are love and light, or because they don't say negative things, or because they are vegan, they are better than others, period. Now, of course it is good to have a certain level of spiritual advancement. On the other hand, all paths ultimately lead back to source. A person who embarks on a spiritual path is not intrinsically better than one who does not. Furthermore, some people who are not into spirituality are nonetheless kind, decent people who help others and contribute to society. Spirituality is wonderful. However, some spiritual people are in survival mode and use a distorted form of spirituality to get their needs met. Some spiritual people judge others, while claiming that judging is wrong, often in subtle, condescending, indirect ways. And these spiritual people are blind to the fact that they themselves are judging others, because if they realized it, they would be bad or spiritually immature by their own standards. Or spiritual people might say they love everyone, they are not divisive, divisiveness is evil, etc. And then immediately after they make a subtle remark about how everyone on the other political side is evil, or about how people on their political side actually care about issue X, implying they are morally superior. Or spiritual people who advocate love and light make a subtle remark about how spiritual people who are more willing to say negative things are spiritually inferior to them. Of course, not all spiritual people are like that. Of course, spirituality is wonderful. And love and light is a perfectly valid path. And people following the love and light path do not always behave that way. However, these are examples of survival mode, because the spiritual person misbehaving in our examples is acting in a way that is neither truthful nor moral. And yet their actions serve their needs. They get to feel better about themselves by behaving superior to others. And maybe they can even get a bit of appreciation from onlookers if they use rhetorical tricks to put others beneath them. Similarly, a person in survival mode might fully adhere to the ideology of whichever political side is most beneficial to themselves and their group. Even though a rational analysis reveals that the mainstream left and right ideologies in the United States in 2025 are both incredibly flawed, as I will explain later in this message. Why do most people adhere to either the left or right political ideology? Well, 1. Rich white men usually perceive that the right can help them get their needs met, while poor black women usually perceive that the left can help them get their needs met. So people simply prefer the faction that can help them get their needs met. Also, if you simply identify as left or right, half the country will think you are a good moral person, simply because you are on the right political side. And in an atomized, divided society, this contributes to meeting your needs. And you get this benefit for free as soon as you say, yes, I am a conservative patriot, or something similar. Furthermore, the left casts you in the role of the hero, who together with your brothers and sisters is about to defeat those evil racists on the right. In doing so, you are standing up for poor oppressed minorities and also nature. And your actions will bring about a utopia. Or, on the right, you and your brothers and sisters are the heroes who are about to defeat those crazy leftists who would otherwise destroy America, which is obviously the only free country in the world. So, really, you are the last defenders of freedom whatsoever, and you are about to win. In both cases, you are smart and moral, while the other half of the country is stupid and evil, and therefore you are better than half the country. Not through any action of your own, but simply because you adopted the correct ideology, which required no effort from you. Of course, this is emotionally comforting. And again, survival mode is about getting one's needs met, like emotional well-being, rather than truth or morality. And yet, the mainstream left and right ideologies of the United States in 2025 are honestly quite insane. They have become vehicles for people in survival mode to get their needs met, and have thus become more emotionally attractive to their base, neglecting truth and morality, e.g., the left telling women they are oppressed. Because, after all, most voters are in survival mode, so that is what attracts them. A party based on truth would not be that popular, because truth is not perceived as a common good, like the standard package of left or right beliefs. It is simply emotionally more pleasant to know that one's faction is saving the country, while everyone on the other side is stupid and evil and you are better than them. Now, it is really easy to think that other people actually believe in wrong ideologies because they are in survival mode. However, keep in mind that there is a good chance you are at least to some extent in survival mode as well, and therefore believe in false things because they help you get your needs met, like emotional well-being. Maybe you think, well, I see both sides as garbage, so I am not in survival mode. It is possible you are truly not. However, some people in survival mode take the road of enlightened centrism, where they believe everyone else is a drooling idiot except them, and only they are smart enough to perceive it. Plus, they might think the truth lies exactly in the middle between the two sides. This is another way to feel better than others, and it is not true. Yes, both sides are deeply flawed. However, they are not both equally flawed, and the truth does not lie exactly in the middle between left and right. Also, there are truly good smart people on both the left and the right. Plus, there are also some truthful, courageous, good moral principles on both the left and the right, and also nonsense, but anyway. There are people on both the left and the right who volunteer in homeless shelters, etc. Also, the idea of the black pill, that literally anyone with any amount of power is evil/a dark puppet in charge, is not accurate and is just a way to protect one's heart from further disappointment. Yes, currently most people in power are evil/corrupt/dark puppets in charge, but not all are. And some people are simply gray hats, not black hats. Though, again, yes, some people are not actually in survival mode and do not fall into any of these categories. And yet, most people are in survival mode, and to get their needs met, they have adhered to the standard package of left or right ideas. Even though both packages contain obvious nonsense. Let me explain some of the more obvious nonsense, both on the left and the right. Now, of course you are free to disagree with me. However, if I convinced you that one of your beliefs was false, then that might be a good starting point for personal inquiry. Why did you believe it then? Did you ever make a conscious choice to believe it? Could you perhaps be at least a little in survival mode? Ultimately, in the medium term it is better to live in truth, both for yourself and for the people around you. Let's begin. And when I say, the left, I obviously don't mean, literally every single leftist person. It is rather absurd that half of you think the world would be wonderful if only you could defeat the left, and the other half believe the world would be wonderful if only you could defeat the right. I know this is the situation you are in and so it seems normal to you, but how can it make sense that both political halves of humanity firmly believe they are completely right, while the other side is completely wrong? There are people on the other side who are smarter, more experienced, and more educated than you. Does it really seem plausible to you that you are 100% right and they are 100% wrong? Doesn't it seem more plausible that both sides have merits and flaws? But then why does virtually no one truly listen to the other side? Most of the time, people listen to the other political side to figure out how to convince them to convert politically. But that is not listening to someone unconditionally. If the other side has good points, why does no one truly listen to them? Most people have fully adopted the entire package of left or right belief systems. We have gotten to the point that if you hear someone express a leftist or rightist opinion, then you almost certainly know all their political opinions. Even though, theoretically speaking, if you know someone's position on gun control, you shouldn't automatically know their position on solar energy, because those two things have little to do with each other. This shows that people adopt the entire package of ideas from their side simply because they are in survival mode, because that is what best helps them get their needs met, and people in survival mode do not care about truth or morality. Because if people thought rationally, how come almost everyone has a complete package of left or right ideas? For example, Marx said, "Under no pretext should arms and ammunition be surrendered. Any attempt to disarm the workers must be frustrated, by force if necessary." So, logically speaking, you would expect quite a few leftists to be pro-gun because Marx was. But almost no leftist is pro-gun, because the standard package of leftist ideas is anti-gun. One might be tempted to say that you hold the standard package of political beliefs of your faction, because they are simply all correct and your faction is simply right. However, note that both Democratic and Republican administrations have failed to fix the country, and both Democratic and Republican states are undergoing serious problems. How is that possible if your ideology is so perfect? Sure, it might be true that the administrations and states of your side are doing better than those of the other side, but if overall they are not doing that well, then that simply suggests your side is less flawed. Not that all ideas of your side are the right ones. Also, if you look back at any point in your history, you will probably think those people had wrong opinions. So, what are the odds that your opinions are 100% correct? If the other side were to present data or evidence showing that they are right and you are wrong on a point, then be honest. Would you really examine that evidence with an open mind and switch to the other side on that point if they were right? Or would you look away, or use a cliché that would end reflection, or find a slightly off detail and then use it as an excuse to dismiss the entire argument? If you think carefully and honestly about things and do research, you will find that many, though not all, people on both the left and the right believe in false things. For example, one false thing the left believes is that illegal immigration is acceptable, or at least that it is not a big problem. But it clearly is. Just because the media you listen to says it is not a problem doesn't mean it isn't really. Google average IQ by country, and go to images, and you will find maps indicating that many sub-Saharan African countries have an average IQ of around 70. And that is an average, meaning some of those people have a lower IQ. Look, Western societies are so complex that people with that level of IQ will not be able to function well within them, even if they have good intentions, and not all these people do. The left likes to say that the United States is a nation of immigrants. But historically, immigration to the United States was primarily from Europe. It is not correct to claim that importing a German with an IQ of 100 is like importing a sub-Saharan African with an IQ of 70, who might be illiterate, speak no English, have a completely different cultural and religious background, completely different values and ways of thinking. So, just because importing Germans worked well for the United States historically, does not mean any kind of immigrant will be equally successful. You cannot simply pretend all immigrants are more or less the same. It is not a sufficient rebuttal to say, well, these IQ differences are not genetic. Sub-Saharan Africans have an IQ of 70 because of poor nutrition in youth and lack of books in youth. Well, that still means you will have a person with an IQ of 70 in your society for the rest of their life, which will likely last many decades. And that obviously contradicts the left narrative that immigration is neutral or beneficial, and that all immigrants are substantially interchangeable. Another false thing the left believes is that men and women are equal. They are not, and gender relationships based on the both partners should have the same roles principle that the left promotes do not work for most people. Society has moved in the direction of the gender roles the left wants, and in that time, divorce rates have skyrocketed, relationship rates have collapsed, and most young men and women agree that dating has become a nightmare. Young women today are on average less happy than their grandmothers, despite living in a society closer to the left gender ideal than their grandmothers was. Also, society grants modern women all kinds of rights and affirmative action that their grandmothers did not have, and yet women are more unhappy. This is because abolishing gender roles does not work for most people. For example, the left discriminates against men when it comes to hiring for high-level positions. As a result, there are more women with high incomes. However, while men are generally willing to date women who earn less, many women are not willing to date men who earn less. So leftist policies lead to having more women with high incomes and fewer men with high incomes than before. And in practice, these higher-earning women often don't find a partner and consequently are not happy, because they refuse to date poorer men, while men are kept away from high-income positions. Also, many men are not attracted to career/girl boss women. So, even the high-earning men that exist might well choose to date non-career women, and consequently would not be available as partners for career women. You can say men should get their act together, go earn more, and then date career women, but saying that is not a solution. The math doesn't add up, and then men also have preferences they are not willing to discard. To make the math work, You would also have to get women to date poorer men. And the left, of course, is only interested in intimidating men, not women. So this leftist ideal of abolishing gender roles and having about half of high-level positions be held by women looks good on paper, but does not work in practice, because men and women are different. And if you try to fight human nature wins. The left cares incredibly little about what reality is actually like. They care primarily about liberal values, about what they want to be true, and about what looks good on paper. And then they try to impose all that without being curious about what reality is actually like. But you have to study reality first if you want to craft policies that actually work in reality. And surprisingly few leftists do that. Another issue is that throughout history it has always been argued, with good reason, that you cannot allow net tax recipients to vote. Net tax recipients are those who receive more money from the government than they pay in taxes. Why? Because they will keep voting to get more and more free stuff from the government and higher taxes. Because that is a net benefit for them. They get more free stuff and anyway do not pay more of those increased taxes. In the medium term, forcing the government to hand out ever greater amounts of free goods, while also increasing taxes, obviously destroys society. So you cannot let net tax recipients vote. That is why historically only landowning men could vote. Yes, it is very evil, very oppressive, but giving the right to vote only to landowning men means that only net taxpayers have the right to vote. So you do not have the problem of people voting for ever more free stuff and higher taxes. Because net taxpayers will not keep voting for more taxes. Nowadays, the problem can be circumvented by giving the right to vote to any net taxpayer, regardless of gender. And you can also say that if two people are married, they both get to vote. If added together they become net taxpayers. That way, a housewife can vote if the husband is productive enough, which is obviously acceptable. That would mean that immigrants on state benefits do not get to vote, while productive, net tax-contributing immigrants do. Which many will think is a good thing. However, the left will probably not like the idea that the poor and welfare immigrants do not get to vote. And this idea will be liked even less if they realize that, on average, men are net taxpayers and women are net tax recipients. Which is not caused by gender discrimination, as has been repeatedly demonstrated. Sure, you can always find some discriminating company somewhere, but the vast majority of companies do not pay women less for the same work. If companies discriminate, they usually do so in favor of women. Therefore, the statement "only net taxpayers get to vote" is theoretically gender neutral, but in practice means that more men than women would get to vote. So most of the left will oppose this, even though it is nonetheless obvious that something like this is necessary. Most of the left will simply say, well, I want everyone to have the right to vote because that is the moral principle I believe in, even though a bit of logic clearly shows it does not work. And you cannot prioritize what looks good over what actually works. Also, the left has been claiming for about 50 years that climate change will severely harm civilization in the near future. And yet it keeps not happening, and the left keeps believing it. Here is one example among many. Ecologist Kenneth Watt said in 1970, "The world has been chilling sharply for about 20 years. If present trends continue, the world will be about 4 degrees colder in 1990, but 11 degrees colder in 2000. This is about twice what it would take to put us into an ice age." Did you notice the Earth's temperature dropping by 11 degrees between 1970 and 2000, and a new ice age starting? Neither did I. Sure, one failed prediction is not a big deal, but it is not just one failed prediction. It is a mountain of failed predictions. If the right kept predicting something that never happened, they would rightly be scolded. Now moving to the right. Economist Piketty has shown that if the rate of return on capital is consistently higher than overall economic growth, this leads to greater concentration of wealth, unless you intervene. So basically, and going a bit further than Piketty did, you have to impose high taxes on the rich and on megacorporations, not the middle class, because otherwise the rich and megacorporations will accumulate their wealth uncontrollably. And when their wealth becomes uncontrollable, they start doing stupid things like buying up all the houses, or bribing politicians to let in millions of immigrants to lower labor costs, or brainwashing the population through their personal news channel. It is not a weird anomaly of the system that you suddenly end up living in crony capitalism. If you do not tax the rich enough, they balloon their wealth, and then they corrupt capitalism into crony capitalism. Because that is profitable for them. If you do not apply high taxes to the rich, you have a form of capitalism that degrades over time. So you cannot say, look at the history of capitalism, it is clear it works, because the version of capitalism you are advocating is a form of capitalism that degrades over time. In short, The United States stopped imposing high taxes on the rich around 1981. And it was also roughly around that time that the rich started ballooning their wealth, while the middle class stopped getting richer, despite its increasing productivity. The period between 1950 and 1970, idealized by the American right as the golden age of America, when an average white man could support a family on a single income. Well, taxes on the rich were very high in that period. This is a crucial point. The linchpin of right-wing ideology is, just implement our economic agenda and the rising tide will lift all boats. However, this statement is simply false, because wealth balloons without high taxes for the rich, and therefore pure capitalism degrades over time. A common rebuttal is that if you tax the rich more, they will leave and therefore you will get less tax revenue. But that simply is not true in reality. It sounds smart and sounds true, but it is not. Apparently rich people are also human beings, and not just profit-optimizing machines. Also, it can make real economic sense for a rich person to stay in America despite high taxes, simply because economic opportunities in the US are abundant. States can simply agree with each other that no one will engage in a race to the bottom by lowering the tax rate on the rich. And then all states win because the United States is simply too profitable not to do business in. This is what right-wing advocates should advocate, and left-wing ones will be happy to accept it. Another common rebuttal is, well, the rich already pay this huge percentage of taxes, they shouldn't have to pay even more. First, inequality is huge, so of course the super-rich pay most of the taxes. But does that mean taxing them more is unfair or that wealth inequality is too high and should be addressed? Second, this is an argument of the type, we shouldn't do it because my ideology says it is wrong, which the right normally mocks the left for. After all, ideology aside, higher taxes for the rich work. Strategically, as long as the right refuses to impose high taxes on the rich, the left can simply keep pointing out that the right's economic program works only for those who are already well off. And the left is right about that. I would not implement the default left or right economic agenda, but if I had to choose between the two, and was not considering immigration, I would implement the left economic agenda. Mainly for this reason. If you apply the right standard economic program, you get corporate tyranny, where people are in theory free but in practice economically enslaved. Also, the right likes to say that right-wing governments are more fiscally responsible. However, during Trump's first term, the deficit and debt increased. Even before COVID. This happened largely thanks to his tax cuts, which disproportionately, though not exclusively, benefited the rich. Tax cuts for the non-rich are fine, but those for the rich are not. In contrast, left-wing governments are not very fiscally responsible, but they achieve better results than the right usually acknowledges. This is due to their tendency to raise taxes on the rich, which actually helps stabilize public finances, and reduces inequality, which is a benefit in itself. Next, another false thing some on the right believe is that if only the government got out of the way, things would be great. But in reality, this leads to near monopolies, cartels, company towns, and companies destroying nature. It leads to underfunding of public goods, roads, power grids, food safety checks. It leads billionaires to buy newspapers to censor truth and brainwash the population. And it would not prevent companies from outsourcing American jobs or importing Indians and having them work cheaply. A right-winger might rebut that the left agenda is communism and therefore empty shelves and starvation. But most leftists in 2025 are not in favor of communism. What the current left wants is something like the European model, which certainly is not perfect, but is neither communism nor empty shelves. Frankly, the quality of life is higher in some European countries than in the United States. Even though European countries are often resource poor and do not always have large amounts of good quality farmland. Some right-wing people like to claim that the economy is doing well, so young people should stop complaining, work harder, and stop making bad choices. However, the claim the economy is doing well is based on GDP data and stock market performance, data that do not actually help young people. Young adults have little to no stocks. The claim is also based on unemployment data, but those are manipulated, and that simply means young adults can find a job, not that they can find a job that allows them to buy a house and support a family. In reality, young adults today are really being crushed unreasonably. And many right-wingers look the other way, because they already own a home, so it is good for them that house prices are skyrocketing. Even though this harms the next generation. What we observe in these arguments is that both the modern left and right have a package of emotionally satisfying and perhaps advantageous ideas for their base, or for donors. However, neither the left nor the right prioritize truth. And that does not work. The left prioritizes love, an imperfect form of love, over truth. If that seems an extreme statement, well, it is correct. According to the left, a person with a penis, XY chromosomes, and a normal male body is a woman if they say they are a woman. And much of the left would want you to be punished if you refused to say she to this person, or if you objected to putting them in a women's prison if they commit a crime, or if you objected to letting them play women's sports. Because that is what trans rights really means. This is clearly a prioritization of love, or a form of love, over truth. Because obviously a person with a penis, XY chromosomes, and a normal male body is not a woman. Now, you could perhaps argue that after surgery that person is a woman, but that is not the thesis the left holds. Note that the left does not allow white people to claim they are black, see Rachel Dolezal. And the left also refuses to stop calling certain people Nazis, even if the people in question disagree with being labeled as such. So, you must honor people's stated identity, is not a left-wing position. It is instead about love/care/protection of people perceived as vulnerable, regardless of truth/logical consistency. Or in short, it is love over truth. Even if you agree with the left on the trans position, you cannot deny that this is a prioritization of love over truth. Even if you think this trans position prevents harm, well, that does not mean it is true. Another way the left prioritizes love over truth is that it does not want crime statistics of immigrants published, which contradicts the left's position that illegal immigration is not a problem. Because how come your own faction does not want those crime statistics published? Also, how can you say illegal immigrants are not a problem if you yourself have not seen those crime statistics? In general, the left did not want even experts and doctors to speak out against the anti-COVID work or against the COVID-imposed lockdowns. Similarly, the right prioritizes freedom, an imperfect form of freedom, over truth. And that is also wrong. For example, the right likes to tell the story that America is a noble country, and that everyone has taken advantage of poor, innocent America, and therefore it is right and just for America under Trump to take the freedom to act blatantly selfishly on the world stage. Even if that means violating international law, bombing people, killing people, etc. As long as Trump says it's okay, then it's okay. Everyone takes advantage of poor, noble, innocent America, is simply not true. Sure, America has absolutely done good. However, for about 90 to 95% of its history it has undertaken some kind of military action against foreigners. Even though the United States is geographically so safe, it does not really need to keep killing foreigners. And yet it does. Most right-wingers do not think it is that bad if their country imposes sanctions or blockades on another country, even though that is the modern equivalent of a siege. For example, the sanctions against Iraq killed 500,000 children. https://pubmed ncbi.nlm nih.gov/8520385. The killing of 500,000 Iraqi children is just one example. America sanctions many countries. How would the United States feel if another country indirectly killed 500,000 American children? Well, that is what you did with Iraq. Many right-wingers consider Jews perhaps the most evil or problematic people on the planet, because AIPAC and some other Jewish individuals and organizations indeed have excessive influence over the United States. And yet, on the other hand, the United States has installed between 20 and 60 puppet leaders in other countries, depending on exactly how you define puppet leader. And the right does not care. If the United States does something to another country, it is not a big deal. If another country does something to the United States, it is the most evil thing in the world. If you ask a random person on Earth which country poses the greatest threat to world peace, the country with the highest likelihood of being named is not Israel. It is the United States. Trump claimed that the United States was keeping the oil of Syria when U.S. troops occupied part of Syria. The person pretending to be Trump also recently seized a Venezuelan oil tanker. Wasn't Venezuela supposed to be an anti-drug operation? Then why seize an oil tanker? Unless the operation in Venezuela is really about oil. After all, Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves in the world. And frankly, if you really wanted to launch an anti-drug operation, Venezuela is not the main country to target. Often America sets some part of the world on fire, and right-wing Americans pretend they have no obligation to those people or those refugees, when in reality it was America that set the fire. America's destabilization of Middle Eastern countries is well known. The United States also facilitated the 2014 coup in Ukraine, without which the current war in Ukraine would never have started. So maybe Europeans are not leeches. Maybe the United States poked the bear with a stick and then let the Europeans deal with it when it got angry. Biden also said this. Biden, if Russia invades, meaning tanks or troops cross the border of Ukraine again, then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2, a pipeline from Russia to Germany. We will bring an end to it. Journalist, but how exactly will you do that, since the project and control of the project is under Germany's control? Biden, we will. I promise you we will be able to do it. And then lo and behold, Nord Stream 2 blew up. And so Germany could no longer buy Russian gas, but had to buy much more expensive US LNG. And Germany is going through great financial difficulties because of this, and then Trump told Germany to spend more on defense, which effectively means buying more US weapons. Yes, the United States really seems like the noble and innocent country that is simply exploited by greedy Europeans. The United States also practiced slavery. And the United States committed genocide on Native Americans. Also, it is rather selfish that the United States resorted to genocide to conquer a huge amount of fertile land and then claimed that everyone else was not allowed to commit genocides or conquer territory. Now, this does not mean America is all bad or that other countries are all good. Sure, America does good things, and sure, other countries also do bad things. And sure, if another country were as powerful as America, it would probably do more bad things than it is currently doing. However, the right's narrative of shining, free, noble America, with good intentions, while all other countries try to take advantage of America or are quasi-dictatorships without freedom, is not truthful at all. If you want to defend America by saying that any other country in America's place would have done the same. First, it is not true, because countries are run by people and not everyone is willing to kill foreigners to achieve geopolitical goals. It is simply not correct to say that every single person is a murderer. And two, even if it were true, that would make America simply another country, neither better nor worse than others. We are far from the right's narrative of America as a unique, free, shining city on a hill. It is a glaring error. The actual claim is that America is a country with unique morality, and when that claim is contested the defense reduces to, well, America is not worse than other countries. But the fact that America is not worse than other countries does not make it more moral than almost all others, which is what was being claimed. So this right-wing narrative is not true. And without the right's false narrative of America being this unique, free, unique and moral shining city on a hill that other countries take advantage of, there would also be much less justification for Trump taking the freedom to use threats, tariffs and sanctions against other countries. And occasionally bomb them, kill their people, or seize their oil tankers or oil fields. Most right-wing Americans detested that China limited rare earth exports to the United States, even though the United States does similar things to other countries all the time. Right-wing Americans simply want their country to have the freedom to act blatantly selfishly and tell a false story to justify it. But that means putting freedom before truth. And yes, average Americans are being squeezed and need help. But it was not Syria, Venezuela, or Yemen that squeezed average Americans. So it is not justified to steal Syrian oil, or seize a Venezuelan oil tanker, or bomb the Houthis. Truth must come before love or freedom, even though, as I just explained, neither the left nor the right prioritizes truth. Additionally, both the left and the right mistreat people not in their in-group to a frankly unacceptable extent. Now, yes, it is acceptable to treat people in your in-group better than those in your out-group. However, it is not acceptable to harshly mistreat people in your out-group, which both the left and the right do. For example, in practice, the left discriminates against men. The left claims that the West is not defined by the whiteness of its citizens, but by its values of liberalism, fairness, meritocracy, etc. Well, you cannot define the West that way and then proceed to discriminate against men in unfair, anti-meritocratic ways. By their own logic, that means the left is destroying the West. It is clear that this anti-male discrimination is in place. And it is clear that it is unjustified, because in reality men are not privileged in the West in 2025. 4 arguments. See previous messages, Heron. It's not normal how men are treated, or Tunia. Female supremacy. Besides that, the left thinks that in no case should men be allowed to work for the benefit of other men. This is sexism, misogyny, hatred of women, prejudice, discrimination, patriarchy, old boys network, glass ceiling, toxic masculinity, incel behavior, far right, etc., etc., etc. Even if a man does something harmless like building a shelter for abused men, you will find some women claiming it should not be funded, https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=5 Mr. WR4KQ. While men are being destroyed, the left cares mostly about making sure they don't say bad or so-called harmful words while they are being destroyed. And, of course, in no case should white people be allowed to work for the benefit of other white people. This is white supremacy, racism, Nazism, discrimination, etc. But all groups except for men and white people are allowed to work to organize and benefit themselves. And indeed they do. And this is considered perfectly normal and acceptable. No one calls it female supremacy or something like that. The left mistreats men and white people in this way. And it is also naive, because in reality, practically all groups, except men and white people, promote their group's interests. Now, the right also unacceptably mistreats people in its outgroup. The right is not very troubled by the fact that Trump bombed Iran or Yemen, which killed a significant number of civilians, or that Trump allowed a genocide of Palestinians, or that Trump illegally killed Venezuelans without due process. The right might applaud, or at most might say they don't like it because Trump should focus on America first. But that is still a minor objection against illegal killing. Imagine if another country killed Americans without due process, solely on an unproven accusation of drug trafficking, in a situation where those Americans could have been arrested. Naturally, the American right would call that unacceptable. But when Trump does this to Venezuelans, the right doesn't care much. So, I have given you many examples. And there are many more. If you want to know more, go talk to someone from the other political side and listen to them carefully. Sure, maybe most of what they say is false, but they will have some good arguments. All this seems rather uncomfortable. What is really going on? Well, as we said at the beginning, most people are in survival mode, to varying degrees. And people in survival mode abandon truth and morality, without realizing it, and instead believe whatever helps them get their needs met. Adopting the entire package of beliefs of a political side is a great way to get your needs met. Because your faction will probably help you materially if it comes to power. Also, by adopting this package of beliefs, half the country will immediately think you are a great person, with no effort on your part. This helps meet your psychological needs. And adopting this package of beliefs means that suddenly you find yourself fighting together with your brothers and sisters for a just cause, and you are about to defeat the bad guys on the other political side and save the innocent. It makes you feel good. It lets you selfishly elevate yourself above half the country and gives you community and purpose. But it is not true. Unfortunately, a sort of survival epidemic is underway. Some people went into survival mode and became politically extreme. Then, people on the other political side were infected and got scared, becoming politically more extreme as well. So, did you hold a position that you now think might be false or immoral? Of course, you are free to think about it or do your own research before answering this question. If yes, did you ever consciously adopt that position? Or did you simply enter survival mode at some point and unconsciously adopt it to meet certain needs? People in survival mode often do not realize they are in it, because realizing it would cause suffering, and the central point of survival mode is that the system abandons truth to get its needs met, including emotional well-being. If you think you are not in survival mode, it is certainly possible that you are not. Not everyone is. If, for example, you do more than 90 minutes of meditation or yoga almost every day, that is a good sign you are not in survival mode. To be clear though, for most people 90 minutes of meditation a day would be too much. I am not even saying 90 minutes of meditation is a requirement. Alternatively, another good sign you are not in survival mode is if you are investing a lot of time, energy, or resources into helping others in ways that do not benefit you. And that is great because it helps get others out of survival mode. If you do something that helps others, but that also helps yourself, that might indicate you are not in survival mode. But you might also be in survival mode and just using this strategy for your own benefit. Criticizing others can be valid and sometimes helpful, but it could also just be the desire to set oneself apart from others. You might engage in political activism and think it is beneficial, but, as we said, this clearly benefits you as well. Also, for the reason we discussed, promoting the imperfect standard package of ideas of your side might make the other side feel less secure, and thus might not make the world a better place. Even if your side is mostly right. Now, if you are in survival mode, look, it's okay. Most people are. Also, Earth is incredibly hard. So it makes sense to be in survival mode. It is not your fault. You are doing great. You are absolutely worthy of love, just as you are right now. But if you are in survival mode, then try to figure out which of your needs are not being met and, if possible, try to meet them in more direct, conscious, straightforward ways. And be aware that it is possible that you currently believe in false or immoral things, or that you do not feel true empathy for others, and that you do not realize how hard things are for others and for other groups. This is not due to a flaw in you, it is just because right now you are in survival mode. Meeting your needs and dedicating some time will get you out of survival mode. Spiritual practice, like observing what is happening, can contribute to your mental well-being and help you get out of survival mode in the medium term. So I hope this has been helpful to you. I love you. Your star sister, Tunia. Heron. Inner call greetings of light. I am Heron and I speak to you from the Galactic Federation's operational headquarters. Spaceship. This communication is dedicated to all those who feel an inner call, a subtle vibration, a movement of consciousness that invites us to go beyond what is visible. A new contact protocol based on resonance, intention, and inner openness has been activated on the spaceship. It is not a physical process, but a language of consciousness. It is not about seeing, but about recognizing what already lives within you. Our presences do not operate in material space, but at the symbolic and inner level of perception. That is where connections are born. In dreams, intuitions, moments of stillness, flashes of understanding that emerge without warning. Are active. Quantum clinics as symbolic spaces for rebalancing, memory rooms as inner places of memory, resonance beds as metaphors for alignment, virtual cubes as tools for exploring consciousness. Anyone wishing to declare their openness may optionally write, "I accept your invitation, thank you." It is optional because what matters is the intention. The language of consciousness does not need words. It moves through feelings, symbolic DNA, inner memory. For those who wish to intensify the experience, it is possible to do so from your own bed, at any time. Rest is a natural portal, a place where the mind opens and perception expands. A simple gesture can accompany this process. Place a glass of water on your nightstand and drink it upon waking. Not as a technique but as a symbol. A bridge between what you feel inside and what you bring into your day. Each person will experience what they are ready to experience. Some will feel sensations, others intuitions, and others will simply sense a feeling of greater clarity. There are no promises or expectations. Only your natural rhythm. Welcome to the field. Resonance is open. Memory is in motion. Heron. Galactic Federation.